It's weird, isn't it? As the lockdown gets eased around the world, you still can't get a haircut. I never thought I'd hear myself say that. Anyway, the good news is we can now go sailing. So long as, that is, it's with a member of your household or the person that you're sailing with doesn't get closer than 2 meters. All of which led me to think the answer's obvious, isn't it? Shorthanded or solo sailing. So I came down to Hamble to find out about both. And I also came down to find out about a boat that's been the talk of the town in the shorthanded world. So the boat I've come to see is the Jeanneau Sun Fast 3300. It's one of the latest in a new breed of boats designed specifically for shorthanded sailing. Now I'm with Nigel Colley here, who is actually the UK agent for Jeanneau Yachts. He's also a very experienced amateur solo sailor. And Nigel, first of all, tell us a bit about this boat. Just give us an overall view about what this boat's all about.
Well, this boat has been designed in collaboration between Daniel Andrieux, famous French designer, and Guillaume Verdier, who's more known for his AC America's Cup stuff and the Mocha 60s. So they've got together, Guillaume Verdier's drawn the lines of the boat and Daniel has IRC optimised it. So it's very much a collaboration, but it's been designed specifically with shorthanded racing in mind.
And it's sort of in a line of boats from SunFast that have sort of been quite successful in this area, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I suppose it all kicked off with the SunFast 3200, which came out in 2004, 2005, and that was designed as a one-off project for the Transquadra race, but it did exceptionally well and it took off and Jeanneau put it into production. 10 years later it was still in production. Then they brought out the SunFast 3600, and last year they brought out the SunFast 3300, which is more designed for people wanting to do transoceanic shorthanded racing.
It's a very different looking boat though, isn't it? The first thing that strikes you about this boat, it's so full, or tubby basically in the bow, isn't it?
Well, it is tubby, but it is actually narrower. It's a foot longer than the SunFast 3200. It's a foot narrower, but it's got a lot more volume at the front end, which I'm sure you'll see later. And it's got a very unique rocker profile. It's concave at the bow and concave at the stern, but when you put a concave rocker profile in there, it creates a low pressure point on the hull, so you need to even that out by having the concave at the back as well. But it does create more lift, so the boat pops up onto the plane earlier, and if you can get up on the plane 4 or 5 knots before the next boat, you're doing 4 or 5 knots more boat speed.
And this is all sort of development that's coming from the big boats as well, isn't it? It's coming, I guess, from the Mocha 60s, the Class 40s, those hotbeds of development.
Well, all the latest offshore boats, it started with the minis, with the scow bows, and that's been taken on by the Class 40s, and as far as they're allowed to push their rule. And now the Mocha 60s, everybody's coming out with the scow bows.
Now this has become a very competitive market, isn't it? Around sort of 30-something foot for shorthanded sailing.
Yep.
What's driving that? It's been a steady increase, isn't it, over the last few years?
It's just so much fun. It's the F factor, it's the fun factor. My typical customers are so varied. They're big boat owners coming down. You know, they haven't got the time resource or the energy to organise a crew of 12 to 15 people on their 40-foot plus boats. They've done that and now they just want to go sailing for themselves. The shorthanded scene in general has quietly been growing year on year in the last few years, and now with the 2024 Paris Olympics, with the new mixed gender double-handed keelboat class, it's really taken off.
Sounds really interesting. Right, well, I guess we should go out there and go and play with it.
Yeah, I'll show you how to do it.
Excellent. Good. Okay, so we're on our way out into Solent. It's an absolutely perfect day. It looks like 15 knots, bright sunshine, the rest of it. But of course, we have to still remember the social distancing. So Nigel, that's no man hugs or high fives or anything like that. No, none of that. And of course, what we have brought out with us to make sure that we keep within the rules is some elements to make sure that we stay nice and clean and sanitized. So we've got all our wipes and the rest of it. So that's the safety bit. Here we are out in about 15 knots of breeze, sailing across the Solent. It's been absolutely perfect conditions. Tide's going to the east against the breeze, so we've got a little bit of a sea state that's kicked up now, which is interesting because it means that it's quite a sort of punchy beat now, because that distinctive short Solent chop that is such a boat stopper. And I say interesting because this boat has got such full bows and such a full form up forward. You'd think it would really struggle in these conditions. That's what sort of common sense would tell you, but the reality is that these boats, strange though they may look, are actually very good upwind. You've just got to sail them with a fair bit of heel. And we've been sailing up here at about 18 degrees heel, seems to be what she likes at the moment. But it's a quick little boat. Upwind, we've been doing steady 6.9 to 7.1 knots upwind at an apparent wind angle of 32 degrees. That's not too shabby in anybody's language. But the thing that's really noticeable about this boat, you can't get away from, is how well set up the cockpit is. All of the key controls are led back to places where you can get them. There's basically two zones in this cockpit. There's the companionway, just here around there, the pit where all the halyards, reefing systems, that kind of stuff goes on, just as you'd normally expect. And then back here, further back here in the cockpit, we've got all the key controls from main sheet, course, fine tune, traveller. We've got the running backstays with their fine tune adjustment as well. One of the things that's interesting on this boat is it's got a set of double spreaders, but they're heavily swept aft, so there's a lot of security in the rig, which means that the runners are really a trimming aid upwind. You can sail quite happily without the runners on, which is a big relief to those who are sailing short-handed, that if the runners aren't on, it's not the end of the world. Clearly they perform a rather different task when you're going downhill with a big kite set. The other thing that strikes me about this boat is how deep the cockpit is, which is not something you normally come across on race boats. We're used to them being shallow dishes, but this has got the position of the side decks and the cockpit sole. It means it's really quite deep and you feel quite secure in the cockpit. Also, it means that when you're winding winches and getting your back into something, you're not bending down to get to the winch, which has been a criticism of some of the other boats in this category. The kind of people that are moving over to shorthanded sailing, what's inspired them? Has it been the Grand Prix Rockstar, Imoca 60s, Class 40s, or have they come from a different place?
Well, I think initially they're watching all the Grand Prix Rockstars, but then in recent years all the Walk people have seen the double-handed boats cleaning up in every class. Now the double-handed boats are consistently beating on handicap the fully crewed boats.
Is there anything that you could put your finger on that has allowed that to happen? I mean, why now is the obvious question.
I think because with the growth of double-handed in general, the major manufacturers, Jeanneau, Daler, Beneteau, have clocked onto that and they're designing boats like this, which make double-handed sailing even easier and more manageable. So it's not a scary race boat that needs a full crew. It's designed to be sailed by me, people like me. Middle-aged, portly. I can do it, you can do it.
And I guess some of that knowledge and the technology from the boat builder's point of view has actually come from the Grand Prix end.
Oh, absolutely. they're taking what they learned in the Figaros and all the solo sailors, and they brought that down to a package which works on a boat like this. The French lead the way by far. They know what works. They know the layouts, they know the systems, they know the boat geometries. They really are the masters.
Well, what's you like to sail? Well, I'll tell you one thing you spot right from the very start, and that's that this is a boat that is indeed made for shorthanded sailing. You just can't miss it. The cockpit is so well laid out, even from the helming position. Even if you didn't have the autopilot on, you can move forward, you can get to primary winches, you can get to the secondary winches, the halyards and everything else pretty easily, and blow stuff without ever having to turn the autopilot on if you had to. It's a quick boat as well. Upwind, we've had about 14 knots true today, and we've been steadily sailing at between 6.9 and 7.1 knots at about 32, 33 degrees to the apparent wind angle. The only slight disappointment has been to discover that the autopilot is actually better at doing it than, well, at least I am anyway. So that's a bit of a disappointment for the day. Downwind, if you heat it up in that kind of breeze, we were getting about 10 knots, occasionally hitting 11 knots. It's a quick little boat and it's great fun to sail, and it feels very, very secure, and I can see why it's been such a big hit, particularly with shorthanded sailors, because you get on it and it inspires confidence straight away, because you can reach everything. Got main sheet close to hand, runners, jib sheets, in out haulers on the barber hauler, on the Jeanneau sheets rather, autopilots close to hand. And of course the real key thing, particularly with this modern generation of short-handed boats, or indeed it's crossing over into cruising boats now, is twin rudders and the secure, sure-footed feel that gives. And that's completely unmistakable. And of course in the past that would come with a rather sort of heavy feel to the helm, but this is a helm that you can sail as you would normally expect to sail a boat. It's light on the helm, light to the touch, quick to the response. It's a great little boat to sail. I can really see why it's been so successful already. So the boat's good, that's pretty clear. But what about short-handed sailing? Is it really going to carry on increasing in popularity? I'd say so. I don't think there's much doubt about that at all. As people discover the pleasure of sailing double-handed offshore, where there's never a moment to get bored, there's always so much going on, and the strong sense of satisfaction when you've got round the course, there's no question in my mind that short-handed sailing is here to stay, particularly with boats like this one that make it so much easier to do it. I've also discovered something else. The haircut can wait.